Did you know the answering machine was invented decades before we got a chance to use one, but it was buried by a major corporation? What was the funniest outgoing answering machine message you ever left? And how much did you have to beg your parents to get a second phone line? Leave a message after the tone, because today RAD 80s 90s history is tackling the answering machine and 80s 90s phone tech. Welcome to RAD, an 80s 90s history podcast, remembering the last 2 decades of the 20th century when things were still kind of normal and chill. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. Today, my extremely lovely special guest is Toni Trucks. Toni has been in movies such as The Twilight Saga, Breaking Dawn Part 2, and Dreamgirls. You might know her best these days as Lisa Davis on the TV show SEAL Team, but I know her best as one of the 3 greatest bowlers in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. Toni, thanks for coming on the show.
That's the best introduction I'll ever have, honestly.
Well, by the way, I also am drinking coffee out of my SS Badger coffee mug.
Well done, sir. Well done.
So, Toni, thanks for coming on. Let me ask you this. We're going to do a grab bag of 80s, 90s tech today, but it's mostly going to be answering machine tech. What is your memory of answering machines growing up? Like, do you remember a time when there wasn't one and then one came into your family's life?
Oh, I mean, I don't think for a while before my parents were divorced, I don't remember ever having one. And then I kind of do remember us getting, it was a big deal. It was a big deal, us like figuring out what the outgoing message was going to be. I remember distinctly being at my dad's and like always trying to convince him to do something funny or fun. And he was like, we ended up going with like the automated one that was like, we're not home right now. Leave us a message. He was like the one that came with the phone. But no vision on his part.
Well, I guess that would be actually extremely useful for families that are in multiple houses back and forth. In a way, like what we have to do with this sort of stuff is like, people listening that remember this stuff, it's nostalgia, but also we should like explain why you would have an answering machine. So, like the answering machine was in a way sort of like a family hub. Do you remember being out for the day, coming home from school, and like you would check the answering machine to see how many messages came in over the course of a day?
100%. It was like the first thing you did. You like ran through the door and you would see if your answer machine was blinking. If it was blinking, if there's like a little light on it, it was blinking, then you knew you had messages. Also, if you were super fancy, you had like a little timer code thing that'd be like, it would tell you a number on it. It would tell you the number of messages you had on the phone.
Well, that was when they went digital. Do you remember the original answering machines? It was actually a cassette tape. Right. So you would have to come in and rewind to go back and see what you missed during the day.
Totally. I do remember that. Gosh, if I'd really dug deep enough, I might have found it. But yeah, I do remember having to like rewind the tape. It was like on an automatic rewind though.
Mm. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I can remember having to like literally as if it were a tape deck or something, having to hit rewind and that's not far enough, and then you'd have to erase it because then the space would get clogged up and stuff like that. So you were mentioning so first of all, you would come home and you would hear the calls that were missed, and it was, maybe, the doctor calling, your appointment is next week or something like that, or your friends calling, hey, Toni, do you want to do something tonight or whatever. But also, and I think a way to think about this is what we use texting for now. That was what the answering machine was for kids a lot, where it's like, hey, Mom, I'm staying at Susie's, or soccer practice got canceled, so I'm coming home early. So a lot of it was like literal status updates.
It was, but I would argue that like, honestly, this platform gave us so much more freedom because you had the wiggle room of like, your parents had to be home to get the message. right? So if your parents were like in transit from work to home and you left them a message like, hey, I'm going to stay late at, Susie's house, it took time. So you had like this buffer of time. It was so great. And you could always have these people like, I left a message. I left a message. It wasn't happening in real time. You always had, space to mess up.
Well, and also you could, so people would call in and they would leave a message and it would get recorded. But then also the person with the answering machine would record an outgoing message. And again, before we get into the funny messages and things that people would leave, this was also a status update thing because you could say, we're on vacation for the next week, or don't expect to hear back from us till after everyone gets home at 7. So like you could leave information for other people trying to contact you, essentially.
Oh yeah, that was actually great. I remember like it. I know now workplaces have the outgoing email, but or even the
Right.
outgoing
Out of
message.
office. Yeah.
Yeah, the outgoing message was the best. Like, hey, we're going to be out of town for this long of time, or yeah, it was great. It was great. I'm sure like my dad at one point I think had on there like he's like, my brother doesn't live here anymore. Like, don't if you're a telemarketer, don't call here.
All right, so then let's get into the outgoing messages, which people would make funny ones. The thing that jumps to mind almost immediately is nobody's home, nobody's
Nobody's
home,
home. I
or
haven't
or
thought of that. Nobody's home. Nobody's home. Nobody's home.
or what you
Nobody's
would do. Everybody did this at least once, where you would pretend that you had picked up the phone. Hello,
home.
hello.
Oh, oh yeah.
So people thought you had picked up the phone, but it was actually
So that was I hate that one because I fell for it every time and I was always so mad. I had a friend that's like particularly colorful and he always goes, hello. And I was like, oh, and I would always launch into talking. He's like, just kidding. I'm not home.
Can you remember any memorable joke ones that you pulled, or like doing an impression, or singing a song or anything like that?
Oh, I remember the family, families doing like Christmas
Right.
ones where they
Yes.
would, would be like, the Smiths wish you a Merry Christmas, Smiths wish you, and you're like, you know, like those the holiday themes ones were particularly lovely. And yeah, I'm trying to think of some more. My dad's very straightforward, so he would always um like to leave a very somber, straight message like, hello, you've reached the truck's message. Residents were not available right now, but you
Uh,
know.
Well, conversely, I was thinking today when I was doing more research on this that this was one of the greatest delivery mechanisms for dad jokes ever invented. So I think we're poorer as a society that dads don't have that as a way to make terrible jokes. So you
Yeah.
you showed me offline, and this might be a video only thing, but you found your phone with answering machine from college.
Oh yeah, I mean, let me just for the viewers, for those that can't see it, it's been through some
hmm
things, but
hmm Did you try to see if there is an outgoing message still on there?
there is. There is. Hold please. Let me see if I
All
can make
right.
sure the volume's up. Volume's up to 10, it's
Okay.
telling me for those viewers. See if I can do this.
You have no message.
Okay, fine. All right, fine. We know that. We're gonna know message for them.
Hi. I'm available right now. Be meeting. I'll be back.
If you can listen to how thick my Michigan accent is.
Oh
Hi,
wow.
you've reached Tony Trucks. I'm not available right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back.
Was that you're saying that was college?
That was college. This is like 2002, 2003.
hmm
That's like, this is my senior year message. So 2003 is the pocket of this. This is where all the boys were calling, this is real. I thought
Well,
that was going to reel somebody in.
that reminds me of another thing though. Thinking of boys calling, is one thing that you could do with the answering machine was screen calls. So if you didn't want to answer the phone, but you wanted to find out what the message was, you could just let it
Wait a minute.
play. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're like, just kidding, I'm home.
Oh, right. If you were willing to talk, right?
Yeah, you could pick it up. You could pick it up mid answering machine. That's what that was listen, we're talking about the outgoing messages, but I think about all the times where I know my mom just didn't pick up. And so my message was, Mom, Mom, pick up. Mom, just pick up the phone. Mom, like it wasn't an actual message. It was like that I know you're home.
Well, so let's get into, since this is a history podcast, let's get into the history of the answering machine. It might surprise you to know there's actually some interesting history to this technology. For example, would it surprise you to know that we could have had answering machines decades before the 1980s? I've
How
kind
big
of
would it have been?
Well, right, but in a way, I brought you here under false pretenses because you think you're here to wax nostalgic about 80s tech, when in reality, you're going to get a crash course in the history of deregulation,
Okay.
antitrust law, Ma Bell. So listeners might have heard of Ma Bell, but maybe everybody has heard of AT&T. For most of the 20th century, we didn't have Verizon, T-Mobile, even things like SBC or Ameritech or Pacific Bell, things like that, if people remember from the 80s and 90s. There was just AT&T. It was called the Bell System, after Alexander Graham Bell, inventor of the telephone. The company that he created was the company that AT&T grew out of. This is simplifying things just a bit, but in the early 20th century, when certain new technologies came around, uh, they were granted regulated monopolies by the government. And this makes sense. You hear monopoly and you think that's a terrible thing. We want to break up monopolies, and we're going to get to that. But um, it makes sense in the sense that, think of the electric company. You don't want 3 power plants in a region. You only need one. You don't want the duplication of infrastructure. You don't want, think of cable. Like cable, they grant a monopoly to a cable company in a region because you don't want 5 different cable companies laying fiber to everybody's house, or like stringing cable on the phone lines or whatever. Like there's too much duplication and things like that. Now, I am alighting over a bunch of details that readers of Tim Wu's books would be mad at me for simplifying, but the same thing happened with the telephone, because the U.S. government wants one reliable nationwide network for communications. And I'm talking about the timeline of the turn of the 20th century, so the 1900s, the 19-teens, the 1920s. They want what is called a common carrier. They want one system that is reliable, but they want that one system to not be able to discriminate over who is using your lines, right?
Okay.
In a way, think of electricity again. Like if GE runs the power plant and then they charge less money if you buy a GE washing machine, but charge more money if you buy a non-GE washing machine, like that's sort of the common carrier thing. No discrimination. In modern parlance, it would be similar argument to what net neutrality is on the internet. Charge the same, offer the same level of service, don't discriminate over who connects to your network. Sounds good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good deal. Except what we know about monopolies is they tend to not be good at innovation because there's no competition to force them to be innovative. AT&T basically had a monopoly for most of the 20th century in the United States for especially long distance communication over telephone lines. They tried to bend over backwards to show that they could innovate, and thus the famous Bell Labs, which was this research lab that, I mean, is legendary for a reason. They invented the transistor, which led to computers. They invented the laser. They invented the solar cell. They invented the concept of cellular phones, of sending transmission signals via satellite up to satellites down to space. The problem is, so Bell Labs, again, is rightfully famous. But one of the things that you would notice if you look at their inventions is that AT&T doesn't develop and monetize or productize a lot of these inventions. Some of them just sit in drawers back in their labs gathering dust. Some are picked up by other companies. Because AT&T is a monopoly, they do not necessarily want their monopoly disrupted. They're making tons of money, bankrolled and backed by the government, allowed to by the government. It is the innovator's dilemma on steroids when you have a huge monopoly. So, Toni, take a guess at when the answering machine was actually invented.
I'm gonna say 1932.
Listen, Price is Right rules, you've gone over, but you're very close. It's 1935.
Okay.
It was invented at Bell Labs by someone named Benjamin Thornton, and he developed a machine to record voice messages from a caller on actual tape. Tape as a technology, magnetic tape was a recent invention at the time, and Bell Labs sat on it. AT&T sat on it. They did not offer it to the public because they didn't want to. If you and I, do you remember what your phone looked like when you were a kid? On the YouTube video, I'll find pictures to overlay here now. But that sort of like soft sort of thing, and that it was rotary at first, but then it was touch dial. But do you remember how everybody's phone looked the same when we were kids, right?
Oh, 100%.
You want to know why that was?
Because they were all made in Bell Labs.
And they wouldn't let anyone else create phones. You could get one type of phone, the phone that the phone company produced and allowed you to connect to their system.
Now, are you thinking like we had color choices, didn't we?
There were color choices and slightly different models. And then, you know what? We need to lay a little bit of groundwork again. In a way, what non-80s kids won't remember is that the phones were all corded.
Yep.
So often it was in a central place in the home.
Mm-hmm.
So you couldn't necessarily have private conversations because it was in one place. It was sort of like the family TV or later on the family computer, which was often out in the open. The big innovation that they gave us, they thought us worthy to receive in the
two phone lines.
Well, no, not even yet. No,
I mean in the same phone, like two options, like you could talk in the kitchen or the living room.
You could get there, but actually, we're going to come back to that in a second because that was something that only came in the late 80s and early 90s. At least they wanted you to have this. But what I'm saying is the big innovation was moving from rotary, a spinning dial, to push button. That was the big innovation from basically the 60s into the 70s and the 80s.
Yes.
So this is the problem with.
But we need to say also, just because it was pushed didn't mean that it wasn't going
Sure, right.
It doesn't mean it was going beep boop beep boop. That was a different thing.
The technology that was based on actual like sound tones. That's why hackers, the earliest hackers before there were computer hackers, would hack phone lines, because if you could match the tone of what was dialed out, like either the click 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 or the whatever, you could get free calls. So among other people, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak invented devices before they started making computers to do what they called phone phreaking, which was basically a way to hack the phone system to get free long distance calls. Because again, maybe we need to lay this. You had to pay local calls. You paid a certain dollar figure per month within your area code. That's why we have area codes. Outside the area code, long distance, you paid by the minute. It was expensive. That was the cash cow for AT&T.
You never hear this anymore, but I remember so often growing up, it was regularly said, it's long distance. I'm calling long distance.
Right.
That was always like, I'm calling you long. It was ammunition.
Right. Or your grandmother would rush you off the phone because she was horrified by the amount of money you were spending to call her long distance. Like, we've been on for 15 minutes. Okay, get off. Because wasn't there also, we all knew there was a certain amount of time that you could stay on and it would be cheaper. But then if you went beyond that, then like the rates ratcheted up. Or am I? Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. The long distance calling. I forget that.
So to bring it back to the technology itself, AT&T does not allow people to. You can't just create your own phone or your own device and plug it into their network. And their argument is, in the same way that, Apple says, well, we can't open the App Store because it's not secure and it's unsafe for users. And they made that argument time and time again. And not just, hey, U.S. government, we can't allow this because what if the phone network goes down and the Russians attack and, no one can talk to each other. It was also, they literally made the argument that if you connect things to the network that they don't support, a phone company worker could be out there on the line working on it and they'll get electrocuted.
No, stop.
100%. So there were people and companies that tried to commercialize the answering machine. One was called Telmagnet, which was offered in the United States in 1949. It played outgoing messages and recorded incoming messages on a magnetic wire. It was priced at $200, which was very expensive for 1949, so was not a commercial success. There was also the electronic secretary, and it was kind of state-of-the-art, but it used a 45 RPM record player. So imagine, forget tapes.
Oh my gosh,
it's
so fun.
It's recording messages. I wonder why none of these ever took off, huh?
Gosh, well, I think of like Barbara Streisand, like as a 7-year-old going into like a booth in New York to record
her single,
a song on in her tiny little record she came out with, right? This also made like collect calling a very big deal. Like you don't hear about collect calls as much unless you have ready family members in jail. But like the collect call isn't. That was such a big deal. Like my brother would call collect from college, and it was
so
like,
let's explain that. If I am a poor college student and I'm calling home to my mother, I can, early enough on, you could call the operator and a human being would get on and you'd say, I want to place a collect call.
Yeah, like the operator would come on and she'd be like, operator, how can I help you?
And then the operator would dial your mother and say, will you accept a collect call from Toni Trucks?
Yes.
And you could say yes or no. And if you said yes, then your mother would be billed for that long distance call and you would not.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
We will come back to 1-800-COLLECT and all that stuff in a second. So the quintessential device that was a decade-long battle to try to connect to the phone company was something called Hush-a-phone, which was invented in 1922. Again, look at how far back from the 80s we are. The Hush-a-phone, you know how when you put your mouth over the phone like this to try to muffle your... Okay, so the Hush-a-phone was basically just a cup that you would put over the mouth part of the receiver so that, let's say, and
I feel like I've seen
let's say they would market it as, if you're in the office and you don't want to hear, you don't want your secretary or your coworkers to hear your important business call, put this over. It's literally a cup. You could take a plastic cup or a solo cup and imagine you just cut it out. That's all it is. Nothing complicated, nothing technological. And
somebody retired off of that, though.
Well,
right?
wait, they did not. So the Hush-a-phone was the product of Harry C. Tuttle, president of the Hush-a-phone company, and he keeps trying to market this, and for various reasons, AT&T says you can't connect to this. It degrades the quality of the call. In 1948, Tuttle protest to the Federal Communications Commission asking them to order the phone company to authorize the use of the device. The phone company delayed. The hearing occurred in 1950. Again, delay. This is, it's a quasi-governmental entity, AT&T, at this point. It has the backing of the government. It has the backing of the CIA, the military, because this is a national security sort of thing in the eyes of the government. So they delay issuing a ruling to 1955, 5 years later.
Wow.
The ruling states that the unrestricted use of the Hush-a-phone could result in a general deterioration of the quality of interstate and foreign telephone service. So they reject it. The rejection was overturned a year later in a U.S. Court of Appeals suit, Hushaphone versus United States, with the decision stating, and this is important historically, I'm going to quote this, that the Hushaphone ruling was, quote, an unwarranted interference with the telephone subscriber's right to reasonably use his or her telephone in ways which are privately beneficial without becoming publicly detrimental. And so they're saying your notion that using a cup over the phone is going to ruin the network is bananas. And also, the consumer, the user of the network, has a private interest in using the network in the way that they want. The reason that I quoted that particular line is that is going to be the key ruling, and that sentence of the ruling is going to be key to the eventual breakup of AT&T, of their monopoly.
Oh, okay.
So this is a hugely famous case in antitrust law. It eventually gets settled in 1984, which is why, as 80s kids, we're going to get a whole bunch of technology that we're going to get to. It was the Nixon administration first that started to try to break up AT&T, so a Republican administration. It was the Reagan administration that pushed through the final breakup of AT&T. Now, you think Republicans, they would be, they're pro-business or whatever, but at the same time, they're pro-competition. And the phone company had gained a reputation for being incredibly... Toni, here's something that you could not do. If you did want to set up a new phone line, the phone jack that so you just plug it in and go. That was something that I think it was not till the 1970s that the government forced them to use that technology. Before the phone jack, if you wanted to install a new phone or a second phone line, you had to have the phone company repairman come to your house and install it as if he were wiring, electricity or something like. And so again, it's like the priesthood of they don't want anybody messing with their stuff, messing with their network.
It seems very Apple adjacent, and it's like we're the only ones that can do that.
Right. So the Nixon, Ford, Carter, and then eventually Reagan administration, the FCCs for all of those administrations keep trying to open the doors a crack. Things like MCI, if you remember MCI from 80s and 90s, Microwave Communications Incorporated, was someone that was a company that was formed to allow long-distance service via microwave towers, as opposed to these long-distance telephone lines. And the microwave towers were initially just between Chicago and St. Louis. AT&T fought it tooth and nail. You can see the forerunner of the cellular industry there, but again, it's not AT&T that's moving towards cellular. It's people trying to go against the monopoly.
Mm-hmm.
Here's another one. Fax technology was invented decades before. Again, faxes are something that became prominent in the 80s and 90s. Could have had it earlier. The ability to send pictures via phone lines, I think, was invented in the 30s or the 40s.
What? Wow.
Why not make that a product? AT&T doesn't have to. They're making tons and tons of money, allowed to by the government because it's a monopoly. And also, their cash cow is the long distance calling. So again, when we're talking about what did you use the answering machine for? Oh, things that you would send as text now. Or instead of trying to, sending a fax, what they were afraid of is things like sending a fax or saving a message would discourage you from making an expensive long-distance phone call. They want you to make those long-distance phone calls. They don't want anything that's sort of a shortcut around that. So by 1982, after basically 2 decades of the government trying through various legal mechanisms and actual antitrust lawsuits, trying to break up AT&T. In the United States versus AT&T, it's finally decided that AT&T is a monopoly. And in 1984, the government finally has a ruling that breaks up AT&T and the Bell system into what we would all know as the baby bells. AT&T, the bigger company, keeps the long distance, but there are 7 independent regional holding companies, also known as regional Bell operating companies, or RBOCs, colloquially known as baby bells.
Okay.
So what was the phone company when you were a kid growing up?
I feel like, yeah, there was Pac Bell, right?
Well, or I think Ameritech might have been the one in.
In Michigan, yeah, it was Ameritech, yeah, sure, yeah,
So,
AT&T, Ameritech, yeah,
you had NYNEX in the Northeast, Pacific Telesis, Ameritech, Bell Atlantic, Southwestern Bell, which eventually became SBC, Bell South in the South, and US West in the West. These baby bells get the local calls. AT&T maintains the long distance calls, which is why you would have the local call bill and then the long distance call bill. But the door hasn't been cracked open. It has been blown wide open, because what also in this ruling is allowed is basically a Cambrian explosion of new phone technology that AT&T had been sitting on or not allowing to have happen. And this brings us back to what you and I remember from our childhood. So actually, my notes were, here's the thing on the fax machine. The fax machine was invented in 1924.
that's insane. Like, I feel like it really didn't gain popularity
Until the 80s and 90s. And it was largely a business thing. Like, by the late 90s, a lot of us had fax machines in our houses especially if your parents were doing business or something like that. And so, but business people, back when there were things called actual business cards, you would have your phone number on it. You would have a fax number on it.
Number. You would even see it like early days email. People would say, like, always say that this is my number, this is my fax number. Gosh, yeah. The fax, I have to say that I feel like people are still asking for faxes way after they should have. Once the technology changes, there's like, you fax me. I was like, I remember so many times early days living in Los Angeles where I would be like, they want me to fax them, and going to Kinko's and be like,
oh, right, yeah.
Fax for me?
Well, and weirdly, banks and stuff still ask for your fax number in case. Yeah. Or I feel like that is definitely on the way out. With things like being able to just take a picture.
The picture is huge. Yeah. Like, I love that now you could,
Well, here's another piece of technology that got kicked loose, as we mentioned before, cordless phones. Do you remember the first time that you had a cordless phone, and how mind-blowing was it? Now, again, as kids and teens, it was essential, because then you could go in your room and have a private conversation that your brother or your mother or whomever couldn't listen in on. But also, do you remember just you could look outside with it? You imagine that to have a phone call, there would often be a chair next to where the phone was so that you could sit down. You could just do whatever. You could be making dinner. You could walk all over your house.
Well, two things. Like, our phone lived on a chair, right? It just lived on a chair in the corner for this purpose. But it also makes me think back, you sometimes see those like old timey movies where someone's in a club and they get a phone call, and it's like the longest cord you've ever
Oh, right.
seen.
They literally
like
bring the cord out to the table. Yes. Yeah.
You're like, how long is this cord? And so I was like feeling AT&T must have been making specifically custom cords for the fanciest clubs in town. But, the cordless phone, also what it did was you could go anywhere, but it put you a little out of practice, because that meant you needed to also remember to go put the phone back
to charge it.
The venom that came from my mother when a phone call would come in, and then we would come to the realization that the cordless wasn't charged, was like, it was like, put the damn.
I wonder if that was one of the first things like that, because a lot of things had AA or AAA batteries, and as a father now, I'm that guy that's running around charging everyone's devices. Your iPad, we're leaving the house. You might as well put it on the charger. I wonder if that was the first thing like that. I can't think of something else where it was like, you've got to make sure it's charged or something.
No. Yeah, no. I think that was a big deal. I remember you would put it on the charger, and like, look, you can even see here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like my little light up thing.
Yeah.
But the ones that are listening, like, if I put it back on the charger, a little light comes on that says I'm charging right there.
Right.
Right.
There was also weirdly, do you remember this at all? There was sort of like not a moral panic, but a sort of panic or pearl clutching about the idea that because now with the wireless, you're sending the signal back to the base station that was actually wired into the phone line. And so people were afraid that, oh, your neighbors are listening in on your calls. I don't know if it was because the early technology of that was so piss poor that you could hear other
Well,
people's calls.
didn't you ever have that happen? I did.
Did you really?
100%. Well, I
Okay.
would be on our phone call. I would be on the phone, and all of a sudden I don't know, got messed up at the switchboard or what's going on, but like I could hear somebody else's call.
Yeah,
Like
I
they
can
couldn't
remember that.
necessarily hear me, but I would be able to hear them. I'm like, I can hear, like, or
Yeah.
I'd be talking to somebody, and all of a sudden we would realize that we were also hearing somebody else talk.
Yeah, I wonder if like whatever the radio band was that they put those on early on were just so weak or again, the technology might have gotten better or something like that.
Yeah, but I definitely that was definitely a thing. I don't know why, but yeah.
Okay, so let's get to having your own line, which I found an article from the New York Times from 1995 where they're saying it was the biggest single year increase in new residential phone lines in the United States since the end of World War II. The percentage of households with more than one line has nearly doubled this year to 16%. It's predicted that by the year 2000, as many as half of the nation's 97 million households will have two or more phone lines. Here's why this is happening. Because again, the baby bells are given essentially, it is a regulated monopoly. Again, it's just a regional monopoly. But they don't have the cash cow of the long distance, so they're looking for revenue streams. And so it becomes a concerted marketing effort to be like, hey, just like one car garage is great, but you know what's better is a two-car garage, two phone lines. And the idea of working from home or working remotely or being reachable by your work at your house was something that I don't think was a thing at all in the 70s, and it started to become in the 80s. So the first thing that they market to is you need a business line that's
You need your
separate.
office line.
Right. But then they see the dollar signs when they think of us. They think of the teens.
They think of the youth.
Now, do you remember talking your parents into getting a second line?
Hell yeah.
What did you
Absolutely.
have to promise?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, it was actually a short sell because my mother hated dealing with us in most capacities. She just was like, I don't want to deal with these kids. And so we're like, please, can we have what is lovingly referred to as the teen line?
Mm,
The teen line. And now listen, we need to also highlight for the audience members here, your listeners, that this is back when the phone book was still happening. So
right.
all of a sudden, you're looking in the phone book, the white pages are like people, right? Yellow pages are business,
Businesses.
right? So you're looking at the white pages, you go trucks, 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 trucks. There's Mary trucks. And then right underneath, so I got my regular phone line, but right underneath is the teen line. So I
So
have my own, like, mind blowing. It was like my first real taste of autonomy.
this is sort of an aside, but I think one of the things that when you tell people, younger people, that this was possible, there was a time when everybody's phone number was not only public, it was published on a yearly basis by the phone company. Like
That's right.
you had your fourth grade teacher, you could figure out what their phone number was.
I mean, do we need a spin-off episode just about prank calling because I had
Oh,
access to every teacher's phone number?
right. You know what? Save that for when we do Star 69.
Yes.
So first of all, the teen line is, I mean, I guess it wasn't a thing in the 70s or prior to the 80s that teenagers you'd come home from school and you might be on the phone for 2, 3, 6 hours till 1 a.m. with your friends.
Yes. Yes.
And so
Yes.
it becomes a necessity. Again, I don't know when that became a thing, but by the time I was in middle school and high school, it was like, yeah, this is what you do. You come home from school and you're on with your friends all afternoon. And so, right, your parents,
Yep.
they need to get calls so you can make the argument that it's necessary.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also I think having listeners understand not only is your number public to everybody, it's in a book, anyone can call you. And not only that, every call that you're getting in your formative years has to go through your parents
Mm,
first,
hmm.
like just mortifying. So the incarnation, the invention of the teen line, the introduction of this, it was a gift to the teens everywhere.
Well, but think of what
Like a phone would be in my bedroom
in your
and come
bedroom. So
right to
that's
me.
the revolution of autonomy is you have the cordless phone so you can have private conversations in your bedroom. Then you have a line that is only yours, and probably that phone is in your bedroom. Like, yes, the
Oh my gosh.
just the autonomy, that revolution in having that sort of independence and privacy.
I still remember my teen line phone number. It was so pivotal in my life. It was 723-6963. And as a teenager, the fact that there was a 69 in there was huge.
Oh, geez, I miss I miss that, but yes. Well, also,
What do you mean you're not 15 anymore?
do you remember? Do I still have memorized my first girlfriend's phone number? No, I think I've lost it.
You
But
know so many phone numbers still though. I could
do
give you like
you? I've
10
lost
phone
them
numbers.
all. I've lost
Oh
them
no,
all.
I got them. I got them. I know all my
Really?
girlfriend's phone numbers from
Right, because
our childhood.
again, you would call them every day, multiple
Yep.
times a day, so they're memorized. Did your friends do the thing where if you could spell out a word with the number? Because
Oh yeah.
I don't know if people know this, but there would be letters on the
Yeah.
numbers of and so
What was
somebody had a phone number that the numbers spelled risk, so they would always be like, my phone number is 277 risk or something. That was
my
super cool.
cousin's was like 723 self. That was the big one. Sure, it was like 723 self.
Okay, well let's continue with the technology explosion that the breakup of AT&T allows. Star 69. Star 69 is there's the famous REM song, Star 69. I know you called. I know you called. Somebody calls, hangs up, Star 69. You get the number and you can find out who called you.
Yep, call them right back. Best thing ever. Like somebody calls you, they to prank you, whatever, you just star 69. Or somebody like it rings once. Yeah, that was the thing. 'Cause I remember it had to ring twice in order for you to do star 16.
Now there was also Star 67, but I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
so Star 67, if you hit it before you dialed somebody, it blocked the ability to do Star 69. But
Right.
I felt like that came out later. Like Star 69 came first, and then it was almost like an innovation to add Star 67, maybe.
Well, listen, we're really getting into some high tech stuff here. Okay, you want to do the star 67, say X out the star 69. We're not even talking about the three-way call.
Oh, I didn't even put that in my notes. All right, tell us about three-way calling.
Don't you remember the three-way calling where okay, so like as I recall, what you would do is you dial your friend, and then if you wanted to make a number call, a different call, but add in a call, you could, and this was the source of a lot of drama. You see it on Mean Girls. There's a very
Mm.
like um prominent thing where she three-way calls and she doesn't tell the other person, so they just start talking shit about each other. But you would press the hang up button. What is that called? I forgot. I guess the hang up the
Or the cradle or something. Yeah,
I don't know. You would
yeah,
press the hang up button, which
yeah,
is
yeah.
there's a little hang up button, and you would press it twice, or you would hold it down, and then you would lift it back up, and you get a new dial tone. And then once that started to ring, you would press the cradle again, and then you would all be on together, and you would do three-way. But that was the limit. You three-way, that's it.
Let me give you another. Well, actually, before I get to another technology thing, we mentioned things like calling collect. Also, so there are competitors to AT&T that come out. So if you remember watching TV at all, any commercials like MCI and Sprint
I'm seeing high.
would just advertise constantly because they're trying to go after the cash cow of AT&T long distance, and suddenly there's competition. So literally you couldn't watch a TV show where there wasn't one MCI or Sprint commercial
Totally.
in the 90s. 1-800-COLLECT, I believe, was an AT&T product, but there was competing ones as well. Oh no, that was 1-800-CALL ATT, and then 1-800-COLLECT was somebody else. So again, a product, a multi, probably billion-dollar product was, hey, we're going to brand a new collect calling brand, and maybe people will use that. Again,
Right.
people are just chipping away at the AT&T long distance cash cow.
My dad, when I went to college, somehow my dad engaged a service where you could pay to attach your home phone line and make it a 1-800 number. And that's another thing people might not remember is that 1-800, if it was a 1-800, it means it's free.
Mhm.
1-900,
Was I didn't put that in my notes. That
you're
was,
paying for it. Remember?
well,
1-900. So my dad, for years I had in my brain this 1-800 number, like if I was out of the country or something, I could book, or out of the state, because long distance was still a thing, right?
right.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
if I was in Ann Arbor and wanted to call Manistee, Michigan, I would call this 1-800 number.
Oh, we haven't even talked about long distance is one thing within the country. Overseas long distance, international long distance, way more expensive even than that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wait.
And I can't believe all the things that I didn't put in my notes. The 1-900 numbers, because again, now these were late night commercials, but the 1-900 numbers must have been something else that also got kicked up after the AT&T breakup. And the 1-900 numbers were the sexy time.
That was the sexy time. That was
yeah,
like the
phone
Skinemax
numbers.
numbers where you
Yeah.
were like, yeah, that was like the Skinemax numbers. They call 1-900.
What was didn't Spike Lee do a movie about somebody being a phone sex worker or something? Anyway, that was a whole thing, which I guess now is OnlyFans, or I don't know. People
do you know when phone sex became a profitable thing here, right? Because
I did not.
there.
I just said it didn't occur to me to research that, but I wish I had. Something tells me that didn't exist in the 70s.
No, I don't think.
The fact that there were movies and again moral panics about it says to me that was an innovation of the time. That probably was shaken loose by the AT&T breakup as well. Okay, pagers.
And you would get
those. Sorry.
Remember? Well, also to your point, when you would sometimes you were getting what we would think of as spam, right?
Mhm.
Calls on your answer machine. So occasionally you would get some 1-800 like you called, 1-900 lady,
Mhm.
and and that would be in your answer machine. You're like, oh, it's just junk. It's junk. So there was still that presence of like junk messaging, junk mail happening with the early answering machines.
Okay, so pagers. I graduated high school in '96. I feel like they started to come in around '93, '94. And the joke always was, well, the only people that had pagers are drug dealers. But the truth was, at least in Southwest Florida, that the only people that had pagers were the rich kids.
For us, I was in a very small community, and I was, not at an age to have a pager. But for us, it was always the doctors. You would they wouldn't say silence your cell phones, wasn't a thing, obviously. Right. But if you go to see a play or something or a movie,
silence your pagers.
It was silence your pagers, but it was accepted that if a pager went off, it was a bona fide emergency.
Right.
A baby was being born, someone died.
Like the fax machine, it was a business use case first that eventually they broadened out to, hey, this could be a consumer product. And it was a status symbol. And there's the Missy Elliott song, beat me 911, call me on your cell phone, I'll call you back to see what you're going to tell me. The kids that I knew, again, the rich kids, what would a pager be? It would be on your belt.
Buckle, right?
And all that would happen is it would buzz because you called it like a number. Your pager had a number, but this wasn't a cell phone, so you couldn't talk. All you could do was enter in the number pad numbers. So 911 is emergency, call me back, right?
Right. Or it would show you the number that was calling.
Who called you, right? So you would know who called you, and then we all came up with various codes, and you would, your boyfriend would give you a code to be like, what would you say? You up? That sort of thing. Now, maybe it was 69, like your phone number or something. I don't know. So again, this is technology that you could have had before the AT&T breakup, but you didn't have. Why do you have it in the 80s and 90s is because the baby bells want this local stuff, because your pager wouldn't necessarily be for long distance. It would just be for local calling and legitimate emergencies and
Right.
things like that. Which brings us to the cell phone. We're winding things down here. I believe I got my first cell phone in the year 2000. Can you place your first cell phone?
I got my first cell phone in August of 1999. I was going into my freshman year at University of Michigan, and my parents were driving me into Ann Arbor to drop me off at the dorm, and we saw a T-Mobile.
Mm.
We made a split decision. I actually still have it, but I think it's in Michigan, but I still have my very first
Mm-hmm.
cell phone that I got from T-Mobile, and they got me a plan. And at that point, it was janky. It was minutes, right? So you
Well,
had
okay.
so many minutes.
So that's the thing is, mine was from Singular, which Singular
Okay.
grew out of whatever. But again, the baby bells, they innovate in the cell phone business taking off, because the idea was not that you would use the cell phone to do long distance calls. If you're going to do long distance calls, you're still going to do it on a landline. The cell phone was initially, again, a business thing, like in the movie Wall Street, where what's his name, Michael, who's the actor, he's on the beach and he's using a cell phone and he's calling Charlie Sheen and he's like, I can't. Michael Douglas.
Yes, my figure.
Yes. So originally business, rich people, but then by the late 90s, the reason the baby bells market this is because the intention is not that you're going to make long distance calls. You're not going to call your grandmother and talk for an hour. You're just using this, again, to talk to your mom or your boyfriend, or like, here's what's, where are you? Let's meet up, and that sort of thing. They're incentivized to do that because this is a new revenue stream for them. Do you remember the first few years of using a cell phone, you would never call anyone long distance on it because it was so expensive. And you only had minutes. So even locally, you could run out of minutes and you would be like, hey, listen, don't call me for the rest of the week, because then the month is going to end and it's going to roll over and I'll get more minutes again.
You're like, oh my gosh. Yeah, totally. You're always kind of thinking, I have like 500 minutes to start or something like that, which seems like an eternity, but you just flew through it, and your phone would be, as I recall, I'd have a counter on it. It would say like how many minutes I had left,
Oh, that was useful. I feel like I used to have to call the 1-800 number and they'd tell me how many minutes I had left or something.
Yeah.
But do you remember the first phone you had? Mine was a Nokia, that little tiny one that was like this big.
Mine was like larger than that. It was kind of like a brick. It was I recall that it was red. For some reason I felt like I needed a leather case for it. Don't ask me why. And had a rather large antenna. But what I really remember about it is there was the adoption of phone etiquette didn't exist. Like, we just didn't have it, right? So I remember being in a very important meeting with the department that I was in, the musical theater department, and the program director was up speaking, and my phone goes off in front of like 100 students, and I stand up, I put my finger up to the director of the program, put my finger up, and I'm like, I'll be right back, I've got to take this, and waltzed out of the auditorium. And then came in I'm like, it was my boyfriend.
La-di-da, look at her. She's, yeah.
Like, it didn't even occur to me to, like, I don't know, silence it, turn it off, like sending people to voicemail also wasn't, it wasn't, I remember it didn't even occur to me to send someone to voicemail, because we always, in our normal lives, you had to let it ring.
Yeah.
To get the voicemail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would always, it would just be ringing, ringing, and ringing. So now we know that, like, to your point, like, if you're in public and somebody's just letting their phone ring, we're like, what's the matter with you? Send them to voicemail.
This is slightly outside of 80s and 90s, but you mentioning boyfriend, there's a specific relationship that I remember texting becoming a thing, and this was 2003 fall.
Yeah.
And then remember how many. What did you only get, like 30 texts a month initially or something like that?
Yeah.
And after that, it was $1 a text. It was
insane. No, I remember the first texting experience I had. I was studying abroad in London, and the particular whatever random phone I got when I was abroad had a text feature, and I was like, this is so dumb. And I was staying that one of my other students was staying in the apartment above me. He texted me something, and I was like, what an idiot. Homie. Like, why would you text me? This is so
Yeah,
stupid.
yeah, yeah.
And we sort of texted back and forth. And like by the end of the evening, I was like, this is kind of fun,
Hmm.
But there was a long chunk of time there where I was like, texting is so dumb. Like, how lazy are you? Pick up the phone.
Well, I remember the exact moment that the inverse of that happened to me, where I was on a trip with somebody and we're in two separate cars, and they keep calling to say, like, turn left and then hang up. And I was like, MFer, just send me a text. You don't have, I'm not going to pick up the phone every time you have two words to say to me. Um,
Yeah, totally, totally.
so to wrap this up, we're going to have to come back to, to regulation and antitrust. Because what have we got today? We have essentially three carriers. If YouTube video listeners, you will see on the screen a graph that shows all of the baby bells and all the phone companies. They're just AT&T. They split up and then they slowly come back together into one as mergers, and people acquire everybody. This all came about thanks to the Clinton administration. The Telecommunications Act of 1996 was passed, which again, the argument was we're allowing more competition in the telephone and the communication space. But really what it did was it opened the floodgates to, let's just let everybody buy everyone and reconsolidate into monopolies again. The argument could be made that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 is what allowed the explosion of cellular technology to happen. Again, more detailed and wonkier, nerdier podcasts can adjudicate that. But I will say that one of the things that to bring it to modern times that people would understand is when you had things like ringtones or the early part of getting the internet on your phone, or the weird little apps before the iPhone that the phone companies would offer you. It's almost like they were hearkening back to the AT&T days, because Verizon would only allow a certain type of app, and that app then AT&T wouldn't allow it, or Singular wouldn't allow it, or and they would charge an arm and a leg, so they would keep 90% of the revenue of ringtones and things like that. So in a way, it harkens back to the AT&T monopoly of, well, we don't want you on our network, and so we're controlling things. So today, this is being recorded at the tail end of 2024. One of the big tech news stories of the year is the slow breaking up of the Apple and Google monopoly of the app stores, where they're charging 30% of revenue for apps on phones, which sounds insane. Why do you have to give 30% of every dollar for an app to Apple or Google? That seems like a pretty extreme vig, and people like Epic Games and Spotify have been fighting this in various jurisdictions for years. Here's the reason why the 70-30 split became the normal, is because before the iPhone and before the App Store, the Singulars of the world, the Verizons of the world, if you wanted an app on their phone, they would take 90%. So when Steve Jobs announces the App Store, if you watch the video of that announce, it's a huge roaring cheer, because developers are like, oh my God, we can actually build businesses off of this. 30% seemed like a fair deal at the time. Now that the entire app economy is the way it is, it doesn't feel fair. But that's the sort of accident of history that led us to the sort of, again, monopoly and sort of anti-competitive stuff that we see in the app stores today.
That is wild. I had no idea.
Let me, thinking of the iPhone and things like that, one more thing that we were promised in the 80s and 90s forever was video calling. isn't it funny that like video calling in AT&T commercials in the 80s and 90s, like, wow, this is the gee whiz, like flying cars and video calling, this is the future, man. And now it's just like a friggin' app. Like the things that the smartphone has obviated that seem to be the fact that you can take a picture of something and translate from a different language. If you had invented that in 1970, you could have charged $10,000 for that
Sure.
that amazing sci-fi
I
device.
mean, what you and I are doing right now
Hmm.
wasn't like, commonplace, but on the Jetsons, the
Right,
cartoon, the Jetsons,
right.
right? The futuristic cartoon. I mean, I was at boarding school on a payphone to call my parents, and if I came back from class, there'd be sticky notes lined up on the desk of all of our messages. That was our texting. Didn't
Hmm.
exist. So we would just be like, oh, your mom called you. I remember distinctly I came back one time and it said, Pat Sawhill called. He wants to know if you'll go to homecoming. And I'm like, cool, you know? You know?
Well, so one point that I want to make is that in a way we were there for the golden age of this sort of gadgetry where this technology was given to us. And in a way, it's sort of like back to boring snooze stuff. Every phone is the same slab of glass. And sure, new apps come along and they do new things, but like we just went through a litany of answering machines, pagers, all this stuff. The technology sort of just seems to be commoditized and boring now. And somehow we were around for this weird Cambrian explosion of communications tech that, again, has all been subsumed into the smartphone and social networking. But it was just, in a way, we were kind of lucky to be there for something a little magical, I guess.
Yeah, we didn't even realize it was happening as per always is the thing. You don't even realize what's going on, what you're missing.
One last thing, specifically about the answering machine, but maybe cell phones as well, because you are someone that works in TV and movies. The plot contrivance of the answering machine as an ability to do exposition dumps. Think of how many, Seinfeld episodes or things like that where it's like you need to move the plot along, and so what you do is have the character hit the button on the answering machine, and it's Glenn Close saying, "I just boiled your kid's rabbit" or something,
Yeah, yeah.
or again do the data dump. Well, by the way, they're coming for you. Get out of there, like that sort of, Um, people have talked a lot also about how there's so many old movies where the plot, if you had had a cell phone, the plot would not have happened because you would have just been like, hey, get out of there. They're coming for you.
Right.
So I'm wondering, has that been something that you've heard screenwriters, producers, people talk about, that it's harder? Like that was such an easy cheat to have the answering machine do the exposition dump, or how do you have this character not know if all they have to do is pick up their cell phone? Like, is that something that comes up in scripts and plots and stuff?
God, I don't see it as much anymore, but it's interesting you're mentioning this, like for two reasons. One, I just revisited one of my favorite movies, which is My Best Friend's Wedding,
Hmm.
and you get a major plot point right at the beginning of that movie. Someone calls and leaves, a message that tells you like, the
Or
catapults throughout the movie
think
forward.
of Sleepless in Seattle.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Or
exactly. Well,
or
sometimes it is art imitating life, though. This is like putting my family on blast a little, but when I was 12, we came home to a message on our answer machine that was like, "Hey, your brother's girl, you're like your son's girlfriend's pregnant." Click, like that was the message, and we were like,
see that is a thing that would have happened in a movie. That would have been an easy sort
and it
of
was
way
like
to
real
advance.
life, and then two
Yeah,
days later, I had an nephew. You know what I mean? I was like,
yeah,
"Oh shit,
yeah,
okay."
yeah. Right, that ability to advance the plot in a really easy way. Like, what do the workarounds now is like they have little text bubbles that go up. Like, does that happen in your show? Like sometimes too, where it's like you'll do the text overlay to do the thing that, like, again,
The cryon, whatever, like
right,
just telling you like what's
X,
going, like where you are, what's happening 5 days
right,
later, or whatever.
yeah.
Well, and also, wait, as an actor, when I moved to New York, this is 2003,
Hmm.
when you got your headshots, it didn't just say Tony Trucks, it had a service number on it.
Mm.
So, and that was my answering service.
Oh,
The
wow.
whole business had
Wow.
a 212 number that was solely for the purpose of casting directors and agencies leaving me answering machine messages.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like now they just don't exist. But like I'm telling you, I've got hundreds of headshots of this answering service, and I paid for it for years. I was like, oh my God, what if I need my service number again? You know,
Hmm.
and just like things that. But that was the thing, like, you know, oh, you have a callback. Oh, you booked a job. That all happened through your answering service.
It's funny when I'm doing these episodes. A lot of the nostalgia is, oh, wasn't that fun? Uh, and sometimes it's, wasn't it better that way? Nothing that we're talking about is better. Today is better. It's impossible not to know things. It's impossible not, I know to, like, within a 3-foot radius of where my wife is right now,
Right.
which I get a notification when she swipes her card and she's coming home on the train, or you know, like, or you can look up anything on Wikipedia or something.
But would
Um,
it stress you out if you had to like wait to get home to check your answering machine to see if like your daughter needed
but
something,
I
you know?
wonder, or is what the agita and anxiety of modern life is that you're bombarded with that stuff. So there was a segmented sort of, there are times you could be out of the house and unreachable. Right.
I love being unreachable.
So imagine, we're saying what we've just described nostalgically on a quantifiable basis is things are better now. But on an emotional basis, we're kind of being like, I missed that.
Well, like to your point, in the 80s, the office line was introduced, right? But other than that, people are like, if I'm at home with my family, you
Yeah.
can't reach. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not on the clock. But now they're having to like make rules about when your bosses can reach you, right? My favorite thing to do is to be on a plane.
Yeah. Good
I
point.
I'm
Good point.
I'm not I'm not even pretending to try to get on the Wi-Fi. I'm all like,
That's a
I was on
perfect
a
analogy.
plane. Sorry, I was
Perfect
basically on
analogy.
Mars.
Because we have no real ability, unless you make the choice, we have no real ability to, what are we describing? You don't hear that annoying message from your boss until you get home and check your message. You don't hear that thing from your kid until you get home and check your message. And right, it's better that I know where my kids are right now within 5 seconds. But also, hey, there was a time when human beings got by, society got by forever with it. Just like, I'll find out when I can find out. I don't have to know right now, and I don't have to get a notification instantaneously.
No, like
Or
so and so's on the road. If you're on a road trip, that's why they changed the outgoing message, right? If there was going to be
yeah,
full days where you were road tripping, it's like you won't be able to reach me, right?
or think about, and this is maybe getting a little too dark, but like if a loved one died right now, you would find out instantaneously in the
Immediately.
middle of a movie, in the middle of a meeting, in the middle of your acting, and versus there would wait till you get home or wait till you're back. Hey, look, there was a time when if you went on a steamship to Europe and you were gone for 2 months, maybe you'd get letters that would be three
Yeah.
weeks later, but you wouldn't know anything that happened until you got back from Europe. And
But
that's,
people have the like audacity, and I'm guilty of this as well, to be like, if I'm calling my husband, he doesn't pick up, and I call him again, he doesn't pick up. I'm like, why didn't you pick up?
yeah,
Like, I don't even leave any room for the notion that he might be busy,
right,
right?
right.
I'm like, no, no, no. And but my brother said it best once. He was like, listen, he's like, I'm gonna hang on to this, um, this train of thought for as long as I can, which is the cell phone is for my convenience, not for your convenience to me.
Mm,
It is so that I can do what I need to do, not so that you have access to me all the time.
mm.
That is hard, especially now that he's a father and a husband and all the things. But I liked that. I like to be like trying to have a healthy relationship with it. It's nearly impossible now.
Yes, and I think that's a good philosophical way to end. Before we go, Tony, what would you like us to know about any projects? Is Is this the last season of your show? Did Lisa tell me that?
This is the last season, and I love your wife so much. Okay. But yes, this is the last season. So it's been
Of SEAL Team.
of SEAL Team on Paramount Plus. So with COVID and all the shenanigans in between actor strikes and writer strikes, it's been 8 years and 7 seasons and 114 episodes, something like that. So I am actively trying to figure out what is next. So I'll keep you updated. But I have to tell you, my favorite outgoing message that I ever heard.
Okay, please.
I called the first TV show I ever did was this guy named Leonard Drake, and I called him. He was staying with his mother in New York, and he was like, "Just call me at my mother's house." And she had a landline and her answering machine. When I called, the answering machine was her thick New York accent, and she said, "Hello, you've reached Dolores, but the timing was all wrong." And that was it. And that was it.
That is a good one.
I was like, I love it so much.
That's great. Toni, socials or website to look up whatever it is you end up doing next.
Totally. I'm at Toni Trucks on across the board.
And if you are watching this on YouTube or listening to this on a podcast, however you're hearing my words right now, like and subscribe, as they say, or follow on Spotify or what have you. 80s, 90s history on all of the socials. Toni, thank you so much for doing this. I love you. You're a great friend.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you asked me. I'll come back for anything you want to talk about.
Okay, I think we can find some other things that you might have.
I'm available.
Yes.
I'm unemployed. Can you say?
Okay.
Can you
All right.
sound like...
Well, as I always end this, until then, yo homes, smell you later.